Love Lies Bleeding is a terrific small-scale thriller. Directed by Rose Glass, this film is a sapphic pulse pounder featuring two lovely leading ladies in Kristen Stewart's gym-managing Lou and Katie O'Brien's absolutely jacked brick shithouse Jackie, as the two display great romantic chemistry that blur the lines between that aforementioned sapphic pulse pounder to sapphic meat pounder, because sex. But Love Lies Bleeding isn't just an LGBTQ romance. As stated earlier, it's a smaller budget thriller, and one that's absolutely dripping with style. The movie is set in the 80s, and all the hairstyles, fashion, and clothing that entails, has gorgeous cinematography, and features a deep plot phrasing about how Lou is trying to distance herself from her father in Ed Harris's Lou Sr., who is essentially a local crime lord that has committed many heinous crimes, including murder, but has evaded the police and federal government either through corruption or the fact that they don't have enough evidence to convict Lou Sr. for the criminal escapades he has otherwise clearly committed, because this is the 80s and a lack of cell phones and government surveillance made it easier to get away with crime, because aside from the racism and the homophobia, the 80s really were a simpler time. However, Lou Jr. runs into a problem to where her love interest Jackie has become intertwined in her family politics, which is a problem when those earlier mentioned family politics are the same as crime family politics. And from there, Lou and Jackie are confronted by the family's dark secrets, face the possibility of death, and new elements that could potentially derail their lives and their relationship, which is honestly the most important thing, because obviously. Love Lies Bleeding is very good. For earlier stated reasons, it's well edited, shot, acted, and features a great amount of tension. It overall just works as a movie and a thriller. Yet the most interesting attributes that Love Lies Bleeding has going for it, its greatest strength, is the portrayal of its queer protagonist, something that is near and dear to my heart, like Italian beef or Chicago sports teams that aren't the White Sox, because wow, they suck. And LGBTQ characters are something that I care about, because I do be a transgender woman, and one that is attracted to women at that, meaning that LGBTQ representation is important to me. I'm just one of those gays. And look, I understand that there may be some criticisms against this video, and for me saying that the most important thing about this movie, even besides its thrilling composition, dark sense of humor, and great acting, is that it features a certain type of queer protagonist. But with that said, I hope you hear me out here, because I do believe that Love Lies Bleeding's take on queer representation is very unique and modern, mostly because Love Lies Bleeding features one of my favorite types of LGBTQ characterizations, which is to say, morally complicated gays. See, in many shows, movies, and video games over the years, LGBTQ representation was, and still is, often relegated to 6 sides of a spectrum. Firstly, a lot of movies and TV shows, especially big blockbusters and animated movies from major studios, especially when that said major studio is Disney, feature LGBTQ side characters of little or minimal importance, such as ones that have throwaway lines about how they are in LGBTQ relationships, them being background characters of the same sex kissing, and such that add little to the plot or anything at all, really. Because as stated earlier, they're characters that add all to the narrative, other than for movie studios and even creators to pride themselves, giving themselves high fives and pats on their own backs over the fact that their films technically have gay characters, even though those creative projects did the bare minimum when it comes to actually important or meaningful representation of the LGBTQ community. If anything, the LGBTQ characters in these movies have such minimal impact on their respective narratives that their representation is just meaningless. Which is especially frustrating in movies and shows that do this, all while there are main characters with homoerotic energy that would have made sense to be gay, like Poe and Finn in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, because do those dudes have a romantic chemistry? Sure, bromances are valid and cool to see on screen as well, but if Disney really wanted to feature meaningful LGBTQ representation in its Star Wars films, then the SS Finn and Poe ship was ripe for the plundering, because the Rise and the Rise of Skywalker should have referred to man-boners. What I'm trying to say is that an avenue for good LGBTQ representation was present in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and one that one of the actors who played these characters even advocated for, but was overall neglected in favor of just having 2 women kissing for a couple seconds. A blink and you'll miss it sort of representation. One meant for the production company to check a box to say they had gay characters, even though the representation present meant nothing. Secondly, there are main protagonists or important supporting characters who are gay, but only reveal their LGBTQ identity with throwaway lines that never become relevant to the story or the characters ever again. I mean, come on, think about how many Marvel movies or TV shows where a character like, let's say, Loki, discusses how princes have caught his romantic eye in the past, or in how Captain Marvel and Valkyrie are revealed to be an item in the Marvels, only for the narratives in both of these instances to either never or rarely mention that shit ever again, which is just a tease. It just chimbles my brimbles. Not a fan. Thirdly, there are characters and narratives that are queer-coded. Like there are movies, TV shows, and such where there are protagonists or important supporting characters who feel very queer adjacent, even though the text itself doesn't exactly explicitly declare those characters as being gay. And one recent example of this was in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. See, in that movie, the young Phoebe Spangler is a young girl who dresses in a gender non-conforming manner and seems to emotionally click with Melody, a female ghost, no relation, in a way that honestly eventually feels to be romantic. Like, if anything, I was half expecting them to kiss at some point in the movie, or at least attempt to. It's probably hard for a corporeal being to kiss a ghost after all, because the coding was so obvious, because truly the G in LGBTQ stands for ghost gays. But the movie never really capitalizes on this. It never explicitly states that their relationship is queer in the text, even though it feels very queer, which is unfortunate. Fourthly, there's gay or queer-coded villains, something that is a long-established trope in Western fiction. For a few examples, the main antagonist in Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train is gay-coded, Baron Harkonnen from the Dune source material is also gay-coded, and in a comparatively more recent movie, Javier Bardem's Silva in Skyfall mixed and matched that devious energy that kind of made him seem horny for 007. And then there's a whole slew of trans-adjacent psychopathic serial killers who like to wear women's skin in women's clothing, and that's just ugh. While sure, many of the movies featuring this trope remain good, it unfortunately doesn't change the fact that these portrayals are problematic. Fifthly, there's the queer protagonist or important supporting characters, and often heroic at that, who are explicitly gay in the text, which is a better form of representation than compared to the prior 4 entries listed in this video essay. This form of representation, whether in a movie, game, or TV show, features an LGBTQ protagonist in an often morally flattering light, all while also embracing their queer identity in the text itself, and showcasing that said LGBTQ identity where appropriate in the narrative. If anything, these characters are unapologetically gay and morally good, and make for some likable protagonists and supporting characters. See Adora in She-Ra, the Princesses of Power, or Aloy in the Horizon series. It's just positive LGBTQ representation here. And sixthly and finally, there is my favorite LGBTQ character type, which is to say the earlier mentioned morally complicated gays, or when they're women, as I like to call them, and has been coined by one of my online mutuals, Dirtbag Lesbians. Because whether we are discussing something like The Last of Us Part 2 or last year's Bottoms, there have been a few narratives featuring LGBTQ characters who aren't always, morally speaking, the best people. Like, don't get me wrong, Ellie in The Last of Us Part 2 is likable and relatable in terms of representing deep psychological trauma, and PJ and Josie in Bottoms are really funny. But with that being said, these characters aren't exactly morally good, mostly because Ellie handles her intense pain poorly, and PJ and Josie start an all-women's fight club in order to have hot sex with cheerleaders. Because 1 plus fight club equals lesbian coitus, I guess. There's a logical leap here. Yet it must be said that many of us empathize with these morally faulty characters. 1, because, like these characters, most people have moral failings, and 2, these types of characters are such a different take from the other morally righteous LGBTQ protagonists in terms of on-screen representation, showing how far we have come as a culture when featuring more types of queer characters in our media. Because as a gay society, we deserve all sorts of different types of on-screen representation. Just as valid as morally pure gay heroes and protagonists, we deserve characters with messy virtues trying to figure their shit out. We deserve female protags who go through unethical means all while worshipping at the altar of cooter. We deserve dirtbag lesbians. This brings us back to Love Lies Bleeding, mostly because this film features queer protagonists and characters who aren't exactly morally upright. After all, main protagonist Lou isn't all too different from her villainous father, Lou Sr., mostly in that she can have a lack of heart in certain situations. I mean, come on, she didn't leave her father's criminal empire due to a sense of guilt over what she had done. If anything, Lou Jr. left it because she suspects that Lou Sr. murdered her mother, meaning that's Lou stepping away from her father father's criminal empire wasn't done for altruistic reasons. She just doesn't really have remorse for what she did in the past. Furthermore, as shit hits the fan throughout the movie, Lou has no qualms when it comes to potentially killing people or hiding dead bodies in a way that is morbidly conspicuous and, to be completely honest, darkly humorous. In fact, she is more than willing to commit bad deeds in order to get what she wants, which is to say to be with her girlfriend and the absolutely jacked Jackie and evade the suspicions and ire of her crime lord father, Lou Sr., a man that she is more like than she would care to admit. I mean, come on, they have the same f***ing name. Because there are no good Lou's in this movie. If anything, the only virtuous Lou I know is Lou Malnati's. Lou just embodies being a morally complicated gay to her core. However, Lou is not the only character lacking personal integrity in this film. In fact, Lou's mostly muse Jackie is bisexual and isn't afraid to get her hands dirty when it comes to protecting what she values, which is her relationship with Lou. In fact, she is willing to do nearly anything for Lou, which includes some not so savory things of which I won't spoil. And then there's the fact that Jackie still has her sights on a bodybuilding competition in Las Vegas, one that she has prepared for a long time, and had injected herself with steroid-infused Hulk serum in order for her to bulk up for the bodybuilding competition, and thus further attracting Lou with her muscly physique as a result. Because the phrase Hulk smash belongs to horny gays now. And while Jackie's efforts of pain and gain have sympathetic motives, the fact that she and Lou are potentially in mortal peril should probably take priority. Them living is kind of more important than of competition, meaning that when it comes to the whole situation, Jackie honestly doesn't have her priorities straight here. Another morally faulty LGBTQ character in Love Lies Bleeding is Anna Baryshnikov's Daisy, a woman who is essentially a stalker that tries to worm her way into Lou's love life, even though Lou finds her presence to be very uncomfortable, especially because Daisy sometimes tries to passively aggressively sabotage Lou's relationship with Jackie, as well as the fact that she is a woman who doesn't know how to handle rejection. Because even gay women sometimes need to understand the fact that no means no, a message that should be taught to everyone on gay Sesame Street. Daisy is just an irksome presence. In conclusion, Love Lies Bleeding contains my favorite LGBTQ character type, i.e. queer representation who sometimes lack ethical integrity. Whether we are discussing Lou, Jackie, or Daisy, there are plenty of LGBTQ characters in this film who aren't exactly morally pure, unlike Nostalgia for Childhood Youth or the first two seasons of Ted Lasso. These are just emotionally complicated queer people, and that's great in terms of LGBTQ representation. After all, straight folks are cast in all types of roles, and straight characters are present in all types of stories. Morally speaking, they can be good, bad, or in between, and LGBTQ people should receive that same type of representation. The same sorts of characters, roles, and tonal stories, mostly because my very gay community deserves variety in the styles of stories and characters we see, read, or play. We should get all the types of storytelling from various tones and genres that straight people otherwise receive. Because it's awesome for queer folks to see people like us in our media. Regardless of the type of story, it helps us feel seen and we really connect with that shit. And Love Lies Bleeding represents a new guard of LGBTQ narratives, that we don't have to be morally pure or even villainous, that we don't need to just be at the margins of the narrative for the purpose of corporate brownie points and telling us to be grateful for the minimal representation, that we shouldn't have to settle for protagonists that only reveal their rainbow-laced interests in one-off throwaway lines or visuals that aren't really referenced again, that we shouldn't only see ourselves in characters and storylines that are merely queer-coded. Instead, Love Lies Bleeding, and by extension many other recent LGBTQ-centered projects, boldly portray and display radical departures from all of these types of earlier mentioned styles of story, that queer people are just people, that we have moral strengths and failings just like everyone else, that we gays can be morally complicated too.